the next day, but deep down, he knew his life would never be the same. The question wasn't if trouble was coming, it was when, and it was way closer than he realized. Derek's innocence had been proven, but that only raised a far more terrifying mystery. If it wasn't him, then who was killing people in Beacon Hills? Scott woke up from a nightmare so vivid he could still taste blood in his mouth, a vision of himself attacking Allison on a school bus, completely losing control. That nightmare took a chilling turn when he learned that a bus driver had been brutally attacked that same night. Paranoia kicked in. Scott became convinced that he was the monster in the story, which drove him straight to Derek in a desperate search for answers. Derek, the world's creepiest yet oddly helpful mentor.
I can show you how to remember. I can show you how to control the shift, even on a full moon.
The cost? Future loyalty. Because in the supernatural world, nothing comes for free. Back at the bus, now a full-blown crime scene, Scott used his enhanced senses to piece together what happened. The memories returned like a movie in slow motion. He was there, but not as the attacker. He was the victim, trying to protect the driver from Derek. Plot twist no one saw coming. The tension hit a boiling point during a double date at the bowling alley, where Jackson, captain of the lacrosse team, confronted Scott with the growing suspicion that something was seriously off. Meanwhile, Scott was busy using his powers to impress Allison. Things came to a head when the bus driver died in the hospital. Scott stormed off to confront Derek, ready for an all-out brawl. But instead, Derek dropped a bombshell that changed everything. He wasn't the one who attacked the driver. There's another werewolf out there, one much stronger, much more dangerous, the Alpha. The same Alpha who bit Scott and killed Derek's sister, and now, the Alpha was hunting Scott. Derek finally admitted the most terrifying truth of all. He couldn't stop the Alpha on his own. Scott wasn't just a random victim of the bite. He was the centerpiece of the Alpha's plan. His life was in danger, but neither he nor Derek knew exactly why. The real predator was still out there, and Scott was in its sights. War had been officially declared. In the dead of night, Kate Argent stormed into Beacon Hills like a hurricane, armed to the teeth. Her reunion with her brother Chris was straight to the point. She was hunting two werewolves, the Alpha and another one that attacked her. With an assault rifle in hand, Kate clearly wasn't playing around. The next day, Derek cornered Jackson at school with all the subtlety of a starving shark, demanding to know where Scott was. A few hours later, Derek showed up in Stiles' Jeep, critically wounded, shot with a poisoned bullet that gave him only 48 hours to live. Desperate, Derek forced Scott into a suicide mission, infiltrate Allison's house and steal the bullet that could save his life. The twist? The Argents, yes, Scott's girlfriend's family, were the hunters who shot Derek. The irony was thick in the air. Scott entered the Argent house pretending he was there to study, but while he searched for the bullet, he barely avoided being caught by Kate.
You look like a little lost puppy.
The family dinner turned into a psychological interrogation, with Chris and Kate bombarding Scott with seemingly innocent questions and ominous stories about rabid animals that needed to be put down. The message was loud and clear: any creature out of control must die. Meanwhile, Stiles was stuck taking care of Derek at the animal clinic, watching him deteriorate. Derek revealed a gruesome plan B. If Scott didn't make it back in time, Stiles would have to cut off his arm to stop the poison from reaching his heart, because apparently amputation beats death. Scott eventually found the bullet, but Kate caught him outside, accusing him of stealing. Seconds before she made him empty his pockets, Scott pulled off a getaway worthy of an action movie.
What did you take?
Nothing.
It wasn't Scott going through your bags. It was me.
You.
Me.
He reached the clinic at the literal last second, finding Derek on the verge of death. Following Derek's instructions, Scott ground the bullet into powder and turned it into a makeshift antidote. Derek burned the powder and applied it to the wound, instantly triggering the healing process. To prove the Argents couldn't be trusted, Derek took Scott to see his uncle, Peter Hale, left in a vegetative state ever since a fire that killed their entire family. A fire that, according to Derek, was started by the Argents. The war between werewolves and hunters had far darker, bloodier roots than Scott ever imagined, and now he was right in the middle of it, in love with the enemy's daughter. Derek decided it was time for Scott to learn how to truly fight. The cute rookie werewolf phase was over. Derek launched a war movie level training regimen with one brutal lesson. Scott had to learn to control his transformation through anger, and to do that, he needed to stay away from Allison, because in Derek's eyes, love was a weakness. At the same time, Allison began researching the mysterious symbol on her new pendant and uncovered uncovered the legend of the Beast of Jevadon, a monstrous wolf slain by one of her ancestors, a hunter named Argent. Her family carried a hunting legacy that went back centuries. Stiles, always the group's scientist, developed a groundbreaking theory. He monitored Scott's heart rate and made a discovery that changed everything. While anger caused Scott to lose control, thoughts of Allison calmed him.
I don't think she makes you weak. I think she actually gives you control. She's kind of like an anchor. You mean because I love her?
To test the theory, Stiles set up a scenario in the school parking lot where Scott was provoked into a full rage. By focusing on Allison's voice, Scott managed to stay in control, proving that Stiles was right. Meanwhile, Derek discovered a spiral drawn on the window of his uncle's hospital room, a symbol meaning vendetta, the werewolf's promise of revenge. Things got even worse when the Alpha attacked Dr. Deaton, the town vet. Derek revealed that Deaton was more than human, and that he was protecting the Alpha's identity. Deaton knew a lot more than he let on. With time running out, they devised a desperate plan: lure the Alpha to the school by having Scott howl. Scott let out a powerful howl that echoed through the night like a battle cry.
You've got to be kidding me.
Derek showed up moments later, furious they had acted without him. Now they were all trapped in the school with the creature who had been pulling the strings from the start. The hunt had turned into a trap, and Scott was about to learn that being both predator and prey is a dangerously thin line to walk. After the battle at the school, Derek recovered from his injuries and continued training Scott to control his transformations. Scott struggled during the full moon, nearly losing control and hurting his friends, a terrifying close call that only strengthened his resolve to find a cure. Meanwhile, the Alpha kept manipulating events from the shadows, pulling strings that no one could see. Tensions between Scott and Allison grew heavier, weighed down by the secrets he couldn't share. What else could possibly go wrong? The promise of a cure brought Scott and Derek into an uneasy alliance, one fraught with deadly secrets. Derek revealed that his sister, Laura, had been investigating the Alpha before her death and had uncovered two crucial leads: chemistry teacher Harris and a mysterious symbol, the same symbol found on Allison's necklace. Scott's mission was simple: retrieve the necklace. The problem? That simplicity was about to turn into a complicated nightmare. Jackson decided it was time to step out of the shadows and play his hand. He confronted Scott with the confidence of someone who had just uncovered the secret of the century. He knew Scott was a werewolf, and he wasn't after money or fame. Jackson wanted the bite, or he'd spill everything to Allison and her father. Top-tier blackmail. Scott's attempt to recover the necklace failed miserably, and Jackson turned up the pressure, using Scott's enhanced hearing against him. Meanwhile, Stiles, Danny, and Derek traced the mysterious message that had lured everyone to the school, only to uncover something disturbing. It had been sent from Scott's mom's computer. The investigation led Stiles to the hospital, where he made a discovery that changed everything. Peter Hale, Derek's uncle, who had supposedly been left catatonic by the fire, was the Alpha. His nurse had been helping him all along. The helpless patient routine was a total act. Peter confronted Derek with a devastating truth. He had killed Laura to steal her Alpha power and speed up his own healing. He was the one behind all the murders. Sheriff Stilinski then went after Harris, who confessed to teaching a woman how to start the fire that wiped out the Hale family. That woman was wearing a necklace with a wolf symbol. The circle was closing fast, but Jackson hit Scott with an ultimatum that would echo throughout the season: 72 hours to turn him, or social Armageddon would rain down on them both. Kate watched Jackson closely, her eyes narrowing on the scratches on his neck, a sign that he had been attacked by the Alpha. All the pieces were now in place for one explosive final showdown. The truth hit the Argent household like a devastating avalanche. Kate took control of Allison's education, manipulating her into becoming a spy. Her mission? Help capture the second beta, who was clearly Scott. The clinic was protected by a barrier of mountain ash, but Peter threatened Allison from the outside, forcing Scott to leave the safety zone. Scott discovered that his GPS-tracked phone had been taken by Derek, who was now being tortured by Kate. During the interrogation, she revealed their twisted romantic history and her role in the fire that killed Derek's family. Kate wasn't just a hunter, she was a psychopath who exploited a teenage boy to destroy an entire family. In the locker room, the coach shows up and bans Scott from the prom, but convinces Jackson to take Allison instead, hoping to keep her safe. In one of the strangest twists of the season, Jackson forced Lydia to ask Stiles to the dance as a form of apology. Before the event, Scott shared a heartfelt moment with his mom, who encouraged him to be honest with Allison about his feelings. At the dance, Stiles' vulnerability earned him a dance with Lydia.
Get off your cute little ass and dance with me now.
A sweet moment in the midst of supernatural chaos, Scott managed to sneak into the formal and found Allison. As they danced, he prepared to finally come clean, but she interrupted, saying she already trusted him. The irony was brutal. He was about to admit he was a werewolf to the daughter of werewolf hunters. The night took a dark turn when Peter showed up. His next target was Lydia, whom he attacked on the deserted lacrosse field, leaving a vicious bite on her side. Peter then cornered Stiles, demanding to know where Derek was. Under threat of death, Stiles confessed that Derek had Scott's phone and was forced to give up the passcode. The Alpha had used Scott's love against him, and now Derek's life hung in the balance. With Derek located, Peter dragged Stiles away from a gravely injured Lydia, leaving Jackson behind to find her and call for help. At the hospital, Stiles made a breakthrough that connected all the dots. The main suspect in the Hale house fire was a young woman wearing a distinctive pendant, the same one he had seen Kate wearing. Meanwhile, Peter offered Stiles the bite, which he firmly refused. Scott found Derek chained up in the charred ruins of the Hale house. To convince him to fight Peter, Scott revealed a truth Derek didn't want to believe. Peter had orchestrated his own sister's murder to become the Alpha. The two formed a reluctant alliance against the real villain. The Argents arrived at the ruins, led by Kate, and Chris finally confronted his sister, realizing she was the one who had killed innocents in the fire. Just as the family was imploding, the Alpha arrived for the final showdown. Peter exposed Kate as the arsonist and, after a brutal fight straight out of a horror film, killed her without mercy. When he turned on the others, Stiles and Jackson showed up as an unlikely duo, armed with Molotov cocktails. In the battle that followed, Allison distracted Peter at a critical moment, giving Derek the opening he needed. Derek killed Peter, absorbed his power, and became the new Alpha. Scott was finally free from Peter's influence, but still a werewolf, forever. At the hospital, Lydia survived, but her bite wasn't healing, suggesting she was turning into something else. Jackson, hungry for power, approached the new Alpha and asked for the bite.
Now, it's my turn to get what I want.
The cycle was beginning again, and Derek would have to learn that being an alpha means more than power. It means responsibility for every life you touch. Lydia vanished from the hospital, completely naked and disoriented, triggering a frantic search that would uncover more about Beacon Hills than anyone was ready to face. Scott and Stiles raced against time to find her before the hunters did, believing Peter's bite was transforming her. Challenging her father, Allison joined them in the Jeep, a bold move that made it clear whose side she was on in the coming war. Their search led them straight into a trap where they were confronted by Chris Argent. He issued Scott a stern warning. The family's tolerance for him was a rare exception, one that wouldn't extend to a second werewolf in his inner circle. Meanwhile, Sheriff Stilinski, Stiles' father, was on the case. He uncovered a lead in Isaac, a local cemetery worker with a suspicious black eye, working at the same graveyard where a body had been dumped with its liver missing. Coincidence? In Beacon Hills? Not likely. Elsewhere, Jackson confronted Derek, demanding the bite he was promised, but something was wrong. His body began to violently reject the transformation, racked with pain as it expelled a mysterious black fluid. Even Derek couldn't explain what was happening to him. At the Argent household, Allison met her grandfather, Gerard, a chilling presence whose arrival signaled a dangerous new chapter. His intimidating demeanor made it clear Beacon Hills had just received reinforcements. A brutal attack on an ambulance unveiled a new threat. Derek tracked down the culprit, an Omega werewolf surviving by feeding on corpses. But before Derek could offer him a place in his pack, the Argents arrived. Gerard executed the Omega in cold blood, slicing him in half in front of Chris and the hunters. Using the killing as a declaration of war, he made his stance clear. No more codes, no more rules. The new directive was simple: hunt down and eliminate all werewolves. Amid the chaos, Lydia was found alive and unharmed, but still naked and with no memory of what had happened. The question remained: had she become a werewolf? And if not, what had she become? The mystery of Lydia was only just beginning. A new creature had arrived in Beacon Hills, and it wasn't here to make friends. Deaton and Gerard examined the body of the dead hunter and explained to Chris that the creature responsible used a paralytic toxin and killed for sport, not out of hunger. It was a predator that hunted for the sheer thrill of it.
Killing may be its only purpose.
Stiles witnessed the same creature murder a mechanic at an auto shop, a brutal display of power that left him deeply shaken. Meanwhile, Gerard began systematically manipulating Allison, insisting that loyalty to family had to be absolute. Derek intensified the training of his new pack, preparing them not only to survive the Argents, but also this new and unknown monster. He sent Scott on a covert mission to locate the Argent's bestiary, an encyclopedia of supernatural creatures that might hold the answers they needed. The search led them to the lacrosse semifinals. The monster struck again at a public pool, paralyzing Derek and leaving him to drown. Stiles was forced to hold him above water for hours, proving that not even an alpha was safe from this new threat. Gerard invited Scott to a family dinner that felt more like a police interrogation, creating a tense atmosphere and subtly threatening him. Allison eventually deduced that the bestiary wasn't a book, but a flash drive attached to Gerard's keychain. After recovering it in a spy movie-worthy operation, Derek identified the creature from the files. It was a kanama, a shapeshifter unaware of what it was or who it was, confused even by its own reflection. After dinner, Gerard cornered Scott, using a knife to threaten Allison's life and force Scott into serving him.
Because if you don't, this knife goes in her.
And Scott realized he was now fighting on two fronts, against the Kenema and against the Argents themselves. The rules of the game had changed completely. Forced to serve Gerard, Scott found himself dealing with even more complications as Derek's pack launched their own hunt for the Kenema. They tested Jackson with Kenema venom in a scientifically questionable operation, but he showed a reaction. Convinced he wasn't the creature, suspicion shifted to Lydia, a twist no one wanted to believe. A chemistry class turned into a battlefield when Isaac, Derek's new beta, tried to test Lydia by pretending it was just a school project. Scott and Stiles stepped in, delivering an epic display of loyalty and protection, but when Lydia showed no reaction to the venom, Derek's pack became even more certain she was the Kenema. Scott and Allison brought the bestiary to the school guidance counselor, Miss Morell, who translated a crucial passage. The Kenema wasn't seeking a pack, it was seeking a friend. That single line changed everything about how they viewed the creature. That night, Derek, Erica, Isaac, and Boyd cornered Scott, Allison, Stiles, and Lydia at Scott's house, determined to kill Lydia before she could kill again. Scott fought to protect her in a desperate showdown, but the confrontation was cut short when the real Kanema crashed through the window in a dramatic cinematic entrance. Facing down Derek's pack, the creature revealed itself in a transformation that stunned everyone. It was Jackson. The arrogant, popular, seemingly normal teen was the monster haunting Beacon Hills. The revelation turned everything they thought they knew about the Kenema, about Jackson, and about how supernatural creatures choose their hosts on its head. Jackson wasn't just a troubled kid, he was a deadly predator with no control over what he had become. The hunt had become a rescue mission, and saving Jackson meant saving everyone else. While the creature was on the run, Scott and Stiles tracked it to a nightclub where it paralyzed several patrons, including Danny. The attack drew both Sheriff Stilinski and the Argents to the scene, who now realized that Derek was also hunting the creature in a deadly race against time. To prevent further casualties, Scott and Stiles kidnapped Jackson and locked him in a police van for an interrogation that felt more like a therapy session.
And your claws have this liquid that paralyzes people, and you have a tail.
During questioning, they discovered Jackson had no memory whatsoever of his actions as the Kenema. It was as if he were a helpless passenger in his own body. Allison learned from Danny that a video of Jackson's transformation existed on a tablet that had since gone missing. The group pieced together a disturbing puzzle. Someone wasn't just protecting Jackson, they were controlling him, using the Kenema to take out their own enemies. Overwhelmed by the pressure, Scott and Allison decided it was finally time to tell their parents the truth. They braced themselves for the hardest confession of their lives, just as Stiles received a crucial update from Lydia. Lydia had asked Miss Morell to translate more of the bestiary, and what they found changed everything. The original translation had been wrong. The Kenema wasn't looking for a friend, it was looking for a master. Someone was controlling Jackson like a living weapon, and that person had a hit list. The question was no longer just who the Kenema was, but who was using it, and why. The revelation completely reshaped the investigation and put everyone in danger. Because if Jackson had a master, that master knew exactly who the werewolves of Beacon Hills were. The evidence was piling up like pieces of a macabre puzzle. Scott and Stiles managed to convince the sheriff to let them access the case files at the station, where they found security footage placing Matt at the hospital on the night of one of the murders. Scott's mother confirmed having seen him there. With additional evidence from shoe prints and credit card receipts, the sheriff finally had enough for a warrant. Meanwhile, Derek, still weakened from previous injuries, was warned by Deaton that Peter, father, newly resurrected by Lydia after haunting the poor girl's mind, would try to manipulate him, and that Gerard Argent had a bigger plan in motion. Paranoia was in the air. Back at the station, things took a terrifying turn when Matt showed up, armed and unhinged, revealing himself as the Kanema's master in a horror movie-worthy entrance. He took Scott, Stiles, and the sheriff hostage, putting his power on full display.
I know you don't want to hurt people.
Actually, I want to hurt a lot of people.
Gerard, ever the manipulator, handed Allison her mother's suicide note, fueling her growing thirst for revenge against Derek. Derek had bitten Allison's mother after she attacked him, and rather than turn into a werewolf, she chose death. Allison was being shaped into an emotional weapon. Tension escalated when Scott's mom arrived and was also taken hostage. Derek tried to step in, but the Kanema quickly paralyzed him. In the chaos, Matt shot Scott, a brutal move that proved he wasn't bluffing. Matt's motivation came out in a confession soaked in trauma. Years earlier, members of the swim team had nearly drowned him at a party at Isaac's house. The incident had been covered up by Isaac's father. Matt had discovered his control over the Kanema by accident after snapping a photo of one of his attackers, only to find him dead the next day. But as Matt's body began showing reptilian scales, signs he was breaking the Kanema's rules, the hunters stormed the station. Gerard arrived, drowned Matt in a puddle of water, and assumed control of the Kanema. The final twist? Scott had made a secret deal with Gerard to protect his friends. A deal that now left Gerard in full control. The teen had struck a bargain with the devil without even realizing it. With Jackson presumed dead and Stiles missing, alliances in Beacon Hills shifted in one last desperate attempt to survive. Scott joined Derek's pack to track down Stiles, who had been kidnapped and beaten by Gerard to be used as bait. Peter revealed that Jackson wasn't dead. He was evolving in a transformation that defied everything they thought they knew about the supernatural world. Using a digital copy of the bestiary, Peter explained that the Kanema's current form was only a beta stage. Jackson was turning into a winged, deadlier creature. The only way to stop him was through Lydia. She was the key no one had considered. The group headed to an abandoned warehouse where Jackson's body, encased in a cocoon of venom, began to hatch in a scene blending biological horror and science fiction. Gerard arrived and revealed his true motive in a confession that reframed the entire season. He had cancer and had orchestrated the entire conflict to force Derek to bite him, believing it would cure him. But Scott had a secret plan. He had Deaton swap Gerard's medication with pills made from mountain ash. When Derek bit him, Gerard's body violently rejected the transformation in a grotesque, visceral scene. Lydia confronted the monstrous creature, using the key to the house they once shared to reach what was left of Jackson's humanity. It worked. Jackson transformed back. Derek and Peter struck a final blow, but instead of dying, Jackson rose again as a blue-eyed werewolf, finally healed and free. Allison broke up with Scott in a goodbye filled with pain and necessity. Peter then revealed a new threat. An entire alpha pack was already in Beacon Hills. Isaac, disoriented, was rescued by Braden, a professional mercenary. In the middle of a high-speed motorcycle escape, two werewolves begin to chase them. Before they can react, the werewolves merge into a giant mutant alpha. The monstrous alpha causes them to crash. Both Isaac and Braden wake up later. Before being taken, she managed to warn Isaac of a terrifying truth. The Alpha Pack wasn't coming after Derek. They were coming for Scott McCall. Scott decided to celebrate surviving the summer by getting a tattoo, a reward to himself for stepping back and giving Allison space. The problem? His werewolf healing made the ink vanish as fast as the wound healed. It was like trying to tattoo Wolverine. Lydia was trying to convince Allison to start dating again, but their conversation was cut short when a terrified deer crashed into their car, a sign that the town's animals were acting bizarrely.
Actually, terrified.
At the hospital, the girl who had tried to warn Isaac was rushed in critically injured. The Alphas appear and attack her. Scott arrived to help Isaac, but was trapped in the elevator by the leader of the Alpha Pack, Deucalion. Blind but towering like a storm, Deucalion revealed he knew all about Scott's potential, delivering a chilling message that changed everything. We're brothers now, Scott. We're both Alphas. Guys, here's a quick bit of context. At this point in the series, Scott wasn't an Alpha yet. However, more experienced Alphas, like Deucalion, had already sensed that Scott was destined to become a true alpha. Because of that, they already regarded him as one. Scott sought out Derek, who confirmed the threat with an explanation that froze the blood. An entire pack of alphas led by Deucalion had captured Boyd and Erica. To give Scott something permanent in his chaotic life, Derek used a blowtorch to burn the tattoo into Scott's skin. Now the tattoo symbolized an open wound, a mark of the constant emotional pain Scott carried. As the alphas closed in and killed the girl who tried to warn Scott, Lydia and Allison discovered a strange symbol burned into their arms. The mystery was only just beginning, and Scott was about to learn that being a true alpha meant having a target on your back, one every other alpha wanted to claim. Boyd and Cora were on a rampage under an uncontrollable lunar fury, and Scott knew he had only hours before they killed someone innocent. The search took a dark turn when Lydia discovered a body in the public pool, but the murder didn't match a typical werewolf attack. It was something more sinister, more calculated. With time running out and no other options, Scott did the unthinkable. He convinced Chris Argent to return to the hunt. Seeing the body was all it took for Argent to pick up his weapons again. He devised a military-style plan: use ultrasonic emitters to trap Boyd and Cora inside the school and contain them in the boiler room until sunrise. Meanwhile, Stiles uncovered a disturbing pattern. Heather and the other victims weren't random. All of them were virgins, killed in a ritualistic triple death that hinted at something far darker than out-of-control werewolves. The plan to capture Boyd and Cora was set in motion, blending modern tech with ancient werewolf lore. When a teacher was found inside the school, Derek sacrificed himself, luring the feral werewolves into the boiler room. As the sun rose, Derek held the doors shut against the brutal force of the transformed pair, using every ounce of his alpha strength to save them at the exact moment they turned human again.
Get them out of here.
The immediate threat was neutralized, but Stiles delivered a chilling truth that would shift the season's focus entirely. The killings were human sacrifices, and a new, calculating killer had emerged in Beacon Hills. Someone was using ritual murder to gain power, and the victims were being chosen according to a specific pattern. The question was no longer who's next, but how many sacrifices does this new enemy need to complete their macabre ritual? The hospital had turned into a war zone, and Melissa McCall was on the front lines without even realizing it. Amid the chaos of an overcrowded emergency room, Melissa was forced to perform a life-saving procedure on Danny, who was suffering from a collapsed lung. Her heroic actions caught the attention of a sinister presence. She was now seen as a healer, exactly the kind of target the Dalek, the new villain behind the ritual sacrifices, was hunting. Soon after, 2 doctors mysteriously vanished from the hospital. Stiles quickly connected the disappearances to the sacrifice pattern. Things got personal when Deaton called Scott in a panic, warning that he was next. Scott raced to the clinic but arrived too late. Deaton had vanished without a trace. Meanwhile, the Alpha twins from Deucalion's pack were advised to use Lydia to track down Deaton. Cora and Stiles tried activating Lydia's abilities using psychometry and automatic writing, but all they got was a cryptic drawing of a tree. In a tense confrontation, Deucalion pushed Scott to his emotional limits. He offered a cryptic clue: let the currents guide you, while presenting Scott with an impossible choice: save Deaton or save Derek, who was moments away from being attacked by Kali. The breakthrough came when Allison discovered a secret map in his father's office. It didn't just mark where the bodies had been found, it predicted where future ones would appear. He connected the dots to Danny's science project on telluric currents, the same currents Deucalion had mentioned. The sacrifice sites perfectly aligned with these lines of energy, revealing Deaton was being held in the bank vault, the very same place where Boyd and Cora had once been trapped. The climax unfolded on 2 deadly fronts. While Kali cornered Derek in his loft, Scott made a true leader's decision. He sent Isaac and Cora to help Derek, trusting that he could rescue Deaton on his own. After a tense showdown at the bank, they managed to free Deaton. In the aftermath, Scott's eyes glowed bright red for the first time. That's when Deaton revealed the truth that would change everything.
A true alpha is one who rises purely on the strength of the character.
Scott's power didn't come from violence, it came from his humanity, and that made him more dangerous to his enemies than any alpha before him. Darek's dark past was about to collide with the present in devastating fashion. The Darek's sacrifices had escalated, and once again Lydia was drawn to the scene of a murder, this time a police officer. The Darek was now targeting warriors, and the death of a fellow deputy made the case deeply personal for Sheriff Stilinski. Isaac and Allison decoded a Celtic symbol that revealed the complete 5-part pattern of the sacrifices: virgins, warriors, healers, philosophers, and guardians. They were dealing with a ritual that demanded 15 specific deaths. Suspicion fell on Marin Morell after Aiden shared a crucial detail. The Alpha Pack had killed all their emissaries, except Deucalion's. If Morell was still alive, there had to be a reason. Tension mounted when another teacher was kidnapped, fulfilling the philosopher category. In a desperate attempt, Stiles tried to convince his father of the supernatural truth, but failed. The sheriff remained skeptical and was now in immediate danger. The mystery behind the Darek's identity reached a shocking climax during a school recital held in honor of the victims. Lydia was cornered by Jennifer Blake, the seemingly kind and harmless English teacher. Jennifer revealed herself as the Dalek in a terrifying transformation. Recognizing Lydia as a banshee, she prepared to kill her until Sheriff Stilinski burst into the room at the last second. He identified her from an old hospital file. Jennifer was the sole survivor of a brutal attack years ago, saved only because hundreds of birds had sacrificed themselves for her. Exposed, Jennifer revealed her true, disfigured face and overwhelmed everyone with her druidic power. She completed her final ritual by taking Sheriff Stilinski, the last guardian, and vanished with him into the darkness. The man who had dedicated his life to protecting Beacon Hills was now in the hands of the very creature threatening its survival. Stiles was on the verge of losing his father, and Scott learned that some choices have no right answer. During the storm that forced the evacuation of the hospital, Jennifer kidnapped Stiles' father as the final guardian for her ritual. Derek discovered that Jennifer was the Dalek and that Cora was dying, poisoned by the wounds inflicted by the Alphas. Deucalion revealed his true goal. He wanted Scott in his pack because Scott was a true Alpha, someone who rose to Alpha status without having to steal power. With Jennifer threatening to let Cora die and sacrifice Stiles' father, Scott was forced to make the hardest decision of his life: strike a deal with Deucalion to save everyone he loved, even if it meant losing everything. Scott's decision to join Deucalion's pack left his friends in complete shock and what looked like sheer desperation. Stiles was interrogated by the FBI about his father's disappearance in a session that felt more like psychological torture than questioning. Isaac confronted Derek, accusing him of standing idly by, and ultimately shifting his loyalty to Scott in an emotionally charged turn of events. Determined to act on their own, Allison, Isaac, and Stiles formed an unlikely alliance to find the kidnapped parents. They knew the captives were being held somewhere along a telluric current and turned to Lydia, whose ability to sense death was their only real lead. Jennifer had called Lydia a banshee, a revelation they didn't yet fully understand but were about to realize was far more important than they thought. Peter presented Derek with an impossible choice, one that challenged everything he believed in.
I didn't say it works every time. Could just as easily kill you.
To save Cora, he would have to give up his alpha powers to heal her, becoming a beta again and leaving himself vulnerable to Deucalion's pack. The investigation into Miss Morell's disappearance led to a crucial discovery in her files. Stiles and Allison found a drawing Lydia had made, over and over again, without knowing why. It was of a tree. They finally understood it was the Nemeton, the mystical heart of Beacon Hills, and the place where their parents were being held. With the location finally uncovered, Deaton proposed a dangerous ritual, one that would change their lives forever. Scott, Stiles, and Allison would become surrogate sacrifices for their parents. By being submerged in freezing water until their hearts stopped, temporarily, they could find the Nemeton. Deaton warned them of the price in a grim caution. The ritual would leave behind a lasting darkness in their hearts, and Beacon Hills would become a beacon itself, drawing supernatural threats from every corner of the world. At the animal clinic, each of them held a personal item belonging to their mother or father: the sheriff's badge, a ceremonial silver bullet, and a watch, with Isaac, Lydia, and Deaton serving as emotional anchors to bring them back. The three of them plunged into the freezing water. They were literally sacrificing themselves to save their families, unaware that they were opening a door that could never be closed. The sacrifice hurled them into a state between life and death, where time held no meaning and memories became maps. Visions of the past revealed the exact location of the Nemeton in a spiritual journey that spanned eternities in mere minutes. They awoke 16 hours later, with less than 4 hours left until the full moon rise and the eclipse. Derek made his most painful decision yet. He gave up his alpha status to heal Cora, reverting to a beta.
You're okay.
I'm doing much better than you are right now. All because of you.
A powerful act proving that love is stronger than power. Scott reaffirmed his deal with Deucalion, intending to use him as bait to draw Jennifer out. The Alpha Pack didn't wait. They attacked Derek directly. Lydia was forced to unleash her true power in a devastating display. Her banshee screams stunned the Alphas, buying Derek and Cora enough time to escape. Allison and Isaac raced to the Nemeton and found their parents trapped in a basement of roots. Sensing her impending defeat, Jennifer summoned a supernatural storm that began to bury the site. The final showdown took place in an abandoned distillery, just as the lunar eclipse began, stripping all werewolves of their powers. Jennifer used mountain ash to protect herself from Deucalion, revealing that he hadn't always been blind, a deception that lasted for years. In the basement, Isaac, Allison, the sheriff, and Chris struggled to hold up the collapsing ceiling, locked in a race against time and gravity to save the others. Scott refused to be a victim, even when all hope seemed lost. Through sheer willpower, he shattered the mountain ash smash barrier, a feat impossible for any beta or omega. In that act of absolute determination, he ignited his own spark and became a true alpha. With his newfound power, he overpowered Jennifer and broke her control over the storm, saving the parents. He chose not to kill her, proving that true strength comes from the choice not to take a life. Deucalion, his powers and sight restored by the eclipse, did not hesitate. He slit her throat. After the battle, Deucalion and the surviving twins left, warned by Scott and Derek never to return. Allison established a new code for her family. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. Scott and Stiles both felt a lasting darkness settle in their hearts, a permanent reminder of the sacrifice they had made. In a shocking final scene, Jennifer, barely clinging to life in the distillery, was confronted by Peter Hale, declaring,
I am the Alpha.
revealing he had his own dark plan in motion. The sacrifice had saved the parents, but opened the door to even greater threats. Stiles was trapped in a nightmare that made Inception look like a kid's movie. He lay paralyzed in bed as a dark presence entered his room, dragging him toward the Nematon. He found himself bound by the tree's roots, unable to move or scream, until Lydia's voice shattered the horror, forcing him awake. He recounted the experience to Scott and learned about sleep paralysis, but feared it was a side effect of the ritual they had performed. The sacrifice had left its mark on all three of them. Allison's hands trembled, ruining her aim with the bow. Scott's werewolf senses went haywire, his eyes flashing mid-class. Stiles realized he could no longer read. The words on the page had become meaningless scribbles. The hallucinations turned deadly when Allison, seeing a vision of her dead Aunt Kate, nearly fired an arrow straight through Lydia's head. Sheriff Stilinski began re-examining old cases through his new supernatural lens. One haunted him, a case from 8 years ago when a family was killed in a car accident on a full moon. Their 9-year-old daughter, Malia, had supposedly been dragged off by coyotes. Scott's father, an FBI agent, returned to Beacon Hills with the intent of building a case to remove Sheriff Stilinski from office. The pressure made Scott's control waver, especially without Allison as his anchor. But his mother encouraged him to become his own anchor. A strange vision in class led Stiles to a riddle. When is a door not a door? When it's ajar? Deaton confirmed his fears. The ritual had left a door open in their minds, making them vulnerable to the supernatural world. Driven by a need to help the sheriff, Scott and Stiles investigated Malia's case. In the woods, they found the wrecked car from the accident and were confronted by a pair of glowing blue eyes. A coyote emerged from the darkness. It was Malia, trapped in animal form for 8 years, feral and lost. The mystery was only just beginning, and Scott realized that saving Malia would mean confronting traumas that could tear an entire family apart. Malia was finally safe, but the door opened in the minds of Scott, Stiles, and Allison had acted like a beacon, drawing a new, sinister threat to Beacon Hills. Quick side note amidst everything going on, we've just introduced the character Kira and started hinting at a budding romantic connection with Scott. Going into too much detail about it right now would break the pacing of the story, so for now, we're keeping it brief. Just know that she's an important character later on. A convicted terrorist, William Barrow, was brought into the hospital for surgery, muttering about killing those with glowing eyes. During the procedure, a swarm of flies erupted from a tumor inside him in a scene that blended body horror with science fiction. Barrow vanished into the night. It was Halloween, and while Stiles and Scott played pranks on Coach, the twins, now powerless Omegas, asked to join Scott's pack in search of protection. Scott turned them down, still unable to fully trust them. Lydia was haunted by a constant buzzing she identified as flies, which led the pack to realize that Barrow was hiding inside the school. After a tense search through the hallways, they found his hideout in the chemistry lab. On the chalkboard, a sequence of atomic numbers spelled out a name, Kira. Peter convinced Derek to perform a dangerous ritual using the preserved claws of his mother, hoping to communicate with her spirit. Meanwhile, Scott began to grow closer to Kira, sharing an awkward sushi dinner with her and her family. Suddenly, the buzzing Lydia had been hearing changed. She screamed, realizing it wasn't flies, it was electricity. Barrow, a former electrical engineer, had taken Kira to a power substation. Scott arrived just as Barrow pressed a live power cable to Kira. But instead of dying, she absorbed the massive electrical surge in an impossible display. The energy coursed through her. The mysterious figures of the Oni vanished with the sunrise. The Oni are the new supernatural beings who arrived to torment Beacon Hills amidst the growing chaos. But the threat they posed forced Chris Argent to reveal a dark secret he had kept hidden for years. During a weapons deal in Japan, Argent encountered the Oni for the first time in a terrifying display of power that had haunted him ever since. They slaughtered a group of Yakuza to reach their target, a man they marked in a way unlike the others. Argent believed that Katashi, one of the few survivors of the massacre and now a paranoid recluse, might hold the answers. Meanwhile, Stiles was growing increasingly unstable. He discovered a message addressed to Barrow, written on the chemistry classroom chalkboard in his own handwriting. He realized the key that unlocked Barrow's cabinet had been in his possession all along. Terrified that he was losing control of his own actions, he confessed everything to Scott. To lure Katashi out, Argent planned to sell a rare 17th century pistol. Since Katashi never appeared in person, Isaac was sent undercover, posing as the seller in a covert operation. Scott and Kira hid inside Noshiko's home, which was protected by mountain ash. While they waited for nightfall, when the demonic hunters would return, Kira explained the legend of the Kitsune, fox spirits capable of generating fire and lightning. Tension built between them as darkness approached, but Argent's plan failed, forcing him to confront Katashi directly inside his heavily fortified compound. At the same time, the sun went down, and the Oni materialized outside Scott's house in a terrifying display. The situation worsened when Agent McCall arrived demanding answers. Unknowingly breaking the mountain ash barrier as he entered, the Oni stormed into the house and began examining everyone with their supernatural blades. Katashi revealed a truth that changed everything. The Oni were hunting a Nogitsune, a dark spirit that feeds on chaos, pain, and mischief. It was the same type of spirit that had possessed the Yakuza boss years ago. Inside Scott's house, the Oni examined both Kira and Scott, but left them unharmed after finding the self mark behind Scott's ear, proof he wasn't possessed. Katashi issued a final, chilling warning. The Nogitsune is a master trickster and manipulator. If it was among them, the Oni must be allowed to destroy it, regardless of who the host was. The demon wasn't just in Beacon Hills, it was hiding inside someone they knew. The search for the Nogitsune was abruptly interrupted by a phone call that sent chills down everyone's spine. Stiles had called Scott, his voice a terrified whisper echoing through the phone. He had woken up in a dark, cold basement, his leg caught in a steel trap, with no memory of how he got there. He told Scott there was someone else with him in the darkness, right before the call dropped. The entire pack sprang into action, launching a frantic search. Lydia was drawn by a vision to Eichen House, a mental institution with deep supernatural ties, but they found nothing. Agent McCall had an epiphany that changed everything. Stiles wasn't describing a real place, he was describing a dream. He was trapped inside his own subconscious. Following that logic, Scott and the sheriff deciphered clues from the call. The smell Stiles mentioned led them to the old coyote den, where they found him unharmed, but deeply shaken and still with no memory of how he got there. Stiles was taken to the hospital for tests, while Kira's mother, Noshiko, helped her translate a corrupted audio file found on Barrow's phone. The recording was a set of instructions from a Japanese-American internment camp during World War II called Oak Creek, a camp that officially never existed. At the hospital, Stiles prepared for an MRI scan, confiding in Scott his greatest fear, that he might have the same frontotemporal dementia that took his mother's life. The results came in like a death sentence. Stiles' brain showed clear signs of atrophy. Inside the MRI machine, the darkness within Stiles' mind took shape. A bandaged figure, the Nogitsune, confronted him with a chilling riddle. Everyone has one, but no one can lose it. The answer was his shadow. Outside, the hospital's power flickered, and the Oni appeared. The Nogitsune, now in full control of Stiles' body, rose from the machine. Speaking in a voice that wasn't his own, he faced the demons hunting him, and then shattered the hospital's power cables through sheer force of will. The battle for Stiles' soul had begun, and the demon was winning. The tale dated back to 1943 in the Oak Creek internment camp. A young Noshiko had fallen in love with an American Army medic named Reese, at a time when a romance like theirs was nearly impossible. When pneumonia broke out across the camp, spread by corrupt officers selling medicine on the black market, the tension erupted into a devastating riot. Reese was horribly burned by a Molotov cocktail, and Noshiko was shot while trying to protect him. Mortally wounded and consumed by rage, Noshiko prayed for a Nogitsune spirit to possess her, to grant her the power to take revenge on those responsible. But the trickster spirit, in an act of typical cruelty, ignored her weakened body, and instead possessed the corpse of Reese. Wearing the face of the man she loved, the Nogitsune unleashed chaos and unspeakable suffering across the camp. To stop it, Noshiko was forced to kill him, shattering her katana in the process, in one of the most painful decisions anyone could ever make. In the present day, Noshiko handed the broken blade to Kira, revealing the truth.
Why don't you just do it yourself?
Because I'm not a thunder kitsune.
the only one who could reforge the sword using her electrical power. At Derek's loft, the Nogitsune left behind a chessboard, a map of its next moves. With Sheriff Stilinski just one play away from checkmate, the group realized it was an elaborate trap. Noshiko issued a chilling warning that shattered any hope of an easy solution. The only way to save Stiles was to kill him, just as she had once done with Reese. But Scott refused to accept that, not under any circumstances. Then came the final bombshell. It was Scott, Stiles, and Allison's sacrifice at the Nematon that had reawakened the sacred tree, restoring the power that had once sealed the Nogitsune away, and ultimately setting the demon free once more. They had saved their parents, but in doing so, had unleashed one of the most destructive forces the world had ever known. In the middle of a tense standoff at the loft, the Nogitsune, inhabiting Stiles' body, taunted Chris Argent, daring him to pull the trigger as a show of his utter disregard for death. Suddenly, the Oni materialized and vanished just as quickly, teleporting away with the Nogitsune in a move that left everyone stunned. Noshiko confronted the Oni, who demanded the last of her tails, a shard of her broken blade. She refused, prompting their ominous warning. Chaos was coming again. Derek, wounded by an Oni blade that blocked his supernatural healing, took refuge with Peter. Argent revealed to Allison that he had removed the firing pin from his gun. He never intended to kill Stiles. Then, in a shocking twist, the real Stiles reappeared at Scott's house, weak, but healing like a werewolf. The group quickly realized something unthinkable. There were now two Stiles. They paralyzed the real Stiles with Kanama venom to protect him, but the Nogitsune had already begun his psychological onslaught. He goaded the twins into turning on each other, trapped Derek and Argent in a room set to burn them alive, and whispered a devastating truth to Melissa about why Scott's father really left. To save Stiles, Deaton proposed a plan straight out of Inception. Scott and Lydia would have to enter Stiles' mind and guide his true self back into control. Inside Stiles' subconscious, a surreal version of Aiken House, they found him locked in a game of Go against the Nogitsune. It was a mental battlefield where each move carried deadly weight. As chaos unfolded in the real world under the Nogitsune relentless assault, Stiles made a decisive play in the game that changed everything. The move caused a violent physical split. The Nogitsune emerged as a completely separate, identical entity. Then, in a final act of defiance, the Nogitsune vanished, taking Lydia with him. The war had turned personal. Now they were facing a demon with the face of their best friend. With the Nogitsune now separated into a physical form and Lydia taken hostage, the group raced against time in a desperate attempt to save her life. Noshiko's Oni confirmed that the weakened Stiles was indeed the real one, but with a chilling warning. As the Nogitsune grew stronger, the real Stiles was deteriorating, racked by unbearable pain and an icy, creeping cold. Noshiko began teaching Kira the game of Go, insisting it was the key to understanding their enemy's strategy. The search for Lydia led the group to Meredith, another banshee from Aiken House, who finally whispered the location in a trembling voice. Oak Creek, the site of the old internment camp. Argent helped Allison forge silver arrowheads in a final rite of passage, preparing her for the most important battle of her life. The group arrived at Oak Creek only to fall into the Nogitsune's trap. He had seized control of the Oni. What followed was a chaotic clash of ancient blades and modern supernatural force. Amid the frenzy, one of the Oni drove its sword through Allison in a moment that felt like time itself had frozen. She died in Scott's arms, professing her eternal love and leaving a cryptic message for her father with her final breath. Allison's death wasn't just a loss, it was the spark that would change Scott forever. The war had taken its greatest toll, and Scott learned that some victories cost more than any defeat ever could. Allison's death left the group in traumatic shock, but there was no time for mourning. Argent, suppressing his grief with military discipline, instructed Scott on how to report the incident to the police without revealing the supernatural world. As Stiles rapidly weakened under a morbid connection to the Nogitsune, Deaton explained that their only hope was to trap the creature inside a box crafted from the wood of the Nematon. Argent decoded Allison's final message, a revelation that would honor her memory. Silver arrowheads could destroy the Oni permanently as long as the metal remained embedded in their bodies. The final confrontation took place at the school, in a battle that tested everything they had learned. Argent and Isaac used the silver-tipped arrows to take down the demon warriors one by one, a powerful demonstration that love and honor could overcome ancient magic. A werewolf's bite forces transformation, and since a fox spirit cannot not coexist as a wolf, the Nogitsune crumbled into dust. With the demon defeated, Stiles returned to normal, and the fly containing the Nogitsune's spirit was sealed inside the Nemeton box. Peace was restored, but at the cost of a life that would never be forgotten. The story closed with Derek experiencing a disturbing vision. He was being captured by hunters. The vision turned real when he woke up and came face to face with a figure from the past.
You're real.
Kate Argent, alive and transforming before his eyes into an unknown supernatural creature. The nightmare was far from over. In the pulsing heart of Mexico, Scott's pack infiltrated a lavish party run by the Calaveras hunters, an operation blending diplomacy with covert espionage. Stiles put $50,000 on the table to buy Derek's freedom. Araya, the hunters' leader, wasn't impressed by the money, but by the pack's audacity. The negotiation collapsed, and the party turned out to be a carefully staged trap. Captured, Araya decided to test the true alpha through a brutal method, torture designed to strip away all masks. She interrogated Lydia, attempting to coerce her into using her banshee powers, but the real test was reserved for Scott. Bound to an electrical device, Scott was tortured as Kira, forced into compliance, increased the voltage, electrocuting her own boyfriend. Araya demanded to know who had really taken Derek, the same person the Calaveras were hunting. Under excruciating pain, Scott gave up the name, Kate Argent. In classic hunter fashion, Araya revealed she already knew. Kate hadn't died. She had been transformed by the claws of an alpha. The Calaveras had tried to force her to uphold the code and end her own life before the transformation took hold, but she escaped, leaving a trail of bodies in her wake. Realizing Scott wasn't their enemy, Araya released him and offered help. A mercenary named Braden, who would lead them to Kate's hideout, La Iglesia. Their journey through the Mexican desert was abruptly interrupted when something attacked their jeep, forcing the group to split. Stiles, Lydia, and Malia stayed behind to fix the vehicle, while Scott, Kira, and Braden continued on foot. They reached the ruins of an old church built atop an ancient Aztec temple, once home to a tribe of jaguar shapeshifters. Meanwhile, the creature that had attacked the jeep returned to confront the rest of the pack. Inside the temple, Scott caught Derek's scent, but also something else, something hostile, something inhuman. Led by instinct, he found a stone wall bearing the Hale family symbol. With a single punch, he shattered it, revealing a hidden chamber. But inside wasn't the Derek they knew. It was a much younger version of him. Kate had used an ancient Aztec ritual to revert Derek back to his teenage years, specifically to the age when he first met her and truly trusted her. Derek's recovery was only the first step in a much larger and far more dangerous plan that would put everyone Scott cared about in mortal danger. Peter revealed the disturbing truth. Derek and Kate had been lovers when he was young and naive, before he knew she was a hunter. Kate's elaborate scheme wasn't just about Derek. She needed his trust to gain access to the Hale family vault and steal the Triskelion, a powerful artifact she believed would help her control her unstable transformation. But when Kate tried to use anger as a tool to teach Derek how to manage her shifting, the emotional trauma backfired, breaking the spell. Derek reverted to his adult form, regaining all his memories and the bitter truth about Kate. The revelation of the $117 million heist changed everything. The mission was no longer just about rescuing Derek, but about recovering a fortune that could destabilize the supernatural world. Peter and Derek hired Braden to track down Kate and the money, an alliance born out of both personal vengeance and financial necessity. But a new threat was emerging in Beacon Hills. An entire family had been brutally slaughtered with an axe, leaving only Sean alive, and in total shock. The crime seemed human at first glance, but the pack suspected something far more sinister. Lacrosse tryouts brought a shift in team dynamics. Scott, struggling to control his powers, delivered a surprisingly poor performance. Meanwhile, a cocky freshman named Liam dominated the field with a natural talent that rubbed Stiles the wrong way and directly challenged Scott's standing. While helping Malia study, Stiles noticed something strange. Lydia's notes in her math notebook weren't equations. They were a complex code she had written unconsciously. It was a subconscious manifestation of her banshee powers. Tension peaked during tryouts when Scott and Stiles accidentally injured Liam, breaking his leg in the heat of competition. At the hospital, Scott was consumed with guilt until Lydia called him in a panic. The code she had cracked was a hit list of supernatural targets, a dead pool, and Sean was on it. But Sean wasn't a victim. He was the killer, a Wendigo. On the hospital rooftop, the Wendigo ambushed Scott in a vicious fight. In the chaos, Liam was thrown over the edge. With no other option and seconds to spare, Scott reached out and bit him. He saved Liam's life, but changed it forever. Scott McCall had just created his first beta, a decision that that would alter both of their lives for good. After biting Liam to save his life, Scott and Stiles completely panicked and ended up kidnapping him in a fiasco that played out like a comedy of errors. Their attempt to explain the supernatural situation only terrified the boy, who managed to escape in a full-blown action movie-style getaway. Meanwhile, Lydia and Kira were working to decode a mysterious list, eventually discovering it was a cipher that required a specific key to crack. The first key was Allison, which revealed part of a hit list targeting supernatural beings in Beacon Hills, each name paired with a chilling bounty. With the full moon approaching, the group had to contain Liam before he could hurt someone, or himself. They lured him to Lydia's lake house under the pretense of a party, using Kira as bait in a classic teenage manipulation scheme. But the plan quickly unraveled when Mason, Liam's friend, invited the entire freshman class.
Hey, are we in the right place for the party?
Turning a private intervention into a full-blown house party. Liam realized it was a trap just as the transformation began. Scott and Kira managed to get him to the boathouse, where they locked him in for an intense training session. Scott drew from his own traumatic experience to help guide Liam through the pain, teaching him the mantra that had once saved his own life: the sun, the moon, the truth. Meanwhile, Stiles' dad discovered that the mastermind behind the attacks, known only as the benefactor, was a professional killer who had hired someone at the party to eliminate a target. Amid the chaos, Lydia heard a sound that led her to the second key to the cipher: Aiden. With most of the list now decoded, the group faced a terrifying truth. Nearly every supernatural being in town had been marked for death. Scott made a promise that would define the rest of the season. He would save them all. What had started as a war had turned into a planned genocide, and Scott was the only one who could stop it. Scott led Brett's pack to Argent's hideout, the only safe place he could think of in a town where everyone was marked for death. Argent revealed that the assassins were using crossbows, identifying them as professional hunters who had now turned into mercenaries. As the group prepared for another attack, Scott reaffirmed that their priority was to protect everyone, not just those on the list. At the hospital, Stiles was recovering from a concussion and shared an honest conversation with Malia about forgiveness. Malia admitted it wasn't her strong suit, but confirmed she truly cared about Stiles, deepening their bond in a rare moment of vulnerability. At the sheriff's station, Lydia insisted on speaking with Meredith, who refused to cooperate with the sheriff. But then Meredith made a shocking demand. She would only talk to Peter Hale. Using an old recording from Lydia's grandmother, Stiles and Malia deduced that her grandmother, also a banshee, had foreseen the Deadpool and hidden a way to stop it at the lake house. When Peter finally confronted Meredith, she touched him, and the devastating truth was revealed through a shared vision. Years ago, while Peter lay in a coma at the hospital, Meredith, then a patient in the same ward, was telepathically hearing his thoughts. In his rage and delirium, Peter had crafted a plan for revenge against all supernatural beings, inventing the idea of a kill list funded by the Hale family's vault. Meredith, overwhelmed by the dark thoughts she heard, had merely carried out the twisted plan he'd conceived. At the lake house, Stiles and Malia discovered that an old record player was actually a disguised computer transmitting the list. Following a hunch from Lydia, they found a bottle of wine that held the key to shutting the system down. Back at the station, Lydia comforted Meredith, who was devastated upon realizing what she had done. But the danger wasn't over. Peter met with Kate, revealing that the Deadpool had only ever been a distraction. His true goal had always been to kill Scott McCall, and now he finally had the power and the chance to do it. While Scott was being forcibly transformed into a berserker, his friends crossed the border on a desperate rescue mission that would push them to their limits. On their way to Mexico, the group had to face the looming threat of the approaching full moon. Derek reminds Liam of the mantra, the sun, the moon, the truth, a sign that true leadership sometimes means teaching others how to survive. Peter tried to manipulate Malia, insisting that to win, she had to embrace her savagery, not control it, a philosophy completely opposed to everything Scott had taught. Upon reaching the temple, the group was ambushed by the berserkers in a seemingly unwinnable battle. The creatures were nearly indestructible, and Derek was critically injured in the fight. Things took a devastating turn when Stiles and Kira received a call from Lydia, revealing the truth. Kate hadn't kidnapped Scott, she had turned him. The berserker they were trying to kill was Scott himself. Remembering Brett's words, Liam faced Scott in his berserker form and repeated that he wasn't a monster, he was a werewolf. With that, he broke the curse and proved that emotional connection could overcome ancient magic. Peter revealed his true plan, attacking Scott in an attempt to steal his true alpha power. But Scott, now free, overpowered Peter in a battle that proved character outweighs ambition. Just as another berserker attacked, Derek rose. fully healed and transformed. He hadn't died, he had evolved, undergoing a rare metamorphosis that only a few werewolves ever achieve. Derek had become a full wolf. With his newfound strength, he destroyed the creature. Chris arrived just in time to stop Kate from escaping, shooting her with a yellow wolfsbane bullet. Wounded, she fled into the night, ready to fight another day. Peter was locked away in the supernatural ward of Eichen House, left under the watch of Dr. Valak. Chris and Braden set off together to hunt Kate. Lydia received the Argent Bestiary to help her understand her growing powers. Kira's broken sword was reforged into a new kind of weapon, and on the lacrosse field, Scott, Stiles, and Liam reunited. Coach reminding them that they had to look out for one another. The pack was stronger than ever, but the threats were only getting bigger. Lydia was trapped in Eichen House Sanatorium, tormented by visions and fragmented memories during an interrogation session that felt more like psychological torture. A doctor was pressuring her to remember what had happened to her friends, threatening her with a trepanation procedure to forcibly extract the information, because apparently, brain surgery solves everything. Scott and Stiles were making plans for life after senior year, but Scott felt that the calm of the past few months was just the prelude to something terrible. He called it regression to the mean.
Life can't ever be all bad or all good. Eventually things have to come back to the middle.
They needed to restrain Liam, who was still struggling to control his powers during the full moon. Amid a storm that hit the town, Deputy Parrish responded to a call and was attacked by a creature with eagle-like talons. The mysterious being drained part of his life force and demanded to know the location of Scott McCall, a chilling sign that new predators had arrived in town. The storm caused a blackout and a massive traffic jam, stranding the whole group as they tried to make it to school for the senior scribe, a cherished senior tradition. Stiles opened up in a vulnerable confession. He feared that after graduation, the group would drift apart for good, and the ritual was his way of cementing their bond before real life pulled them in different directions. At school, the creature ambushed Scott and revealed a terrifying ability, the power to steal the strength of a true alpha. At the height of the confrontation, someone shows up to help Scott. Plot twist, it's Theo, an old classmate from 4th grade who's just returned to Beacon Hills. Theo claimed he had become a werewolf and wanted to join Scott's pack. Despite a heavy air of distrust, the group provisionally accepted him and went through with the ritual, carving their initials into the library bookshelf. Malia added Allison's initials, keeping her memory alive through the ritual. Back at Eichen House, Lydia's memory refused to cooperate, and the doctor moved forward with the drill, closing in on her skull. The past was about to collide with the present in devastating fashion. The Dread Doctors, a new group of twisted scientist villains, unleashed their first experiment in a chilling display of perverted science. Tracy, now transformed into a Kanama, she ambushed the prison transport carrying Donovan, paralyzing the guards and killing a lawyer before vanishing into the night. Scott and his pack launched a pursuit, soon realizing that Tracy was systematically targeting everyone who had once tried to help her. They managed to capture her and brought her to Deaton's clinic, sealing the building with mountain ash. But Tracy's transformation proved dangerously unstable, clear evidence that the doctors were meddling with forces they didn't fully understand. She paralyzed everyone with the venom in her tail and, inexplicably, crossed the mountain ash barrier, proving that the old rules no longer applied to these new creatures. Lydia had a vision and realized that Tracy's next target was her mother, who was on a date with Sheriff Stilinski. Meanwhile, Liam, Mason, and Brett discovered the spot where Tracy had been buried and resurrected by the doctors, and uncovered signs that someone else had been buried there too. The chase reached its climax in the sheriff station's basement, where Tracy cornered Lydia's mother in a hunt that had become deeply personal. Malia confronted her in a brutal fight, but before a victor could emerge, the Dread Doctors stepped out of the shadows. They coldly declared Tracy a failed experiment and killed her with a lethal injection, disappearing just as swiftly, a chilling reminder that they saw their creations as expendable. Scott's pack was left with a terrifying realization. They were nothing more than pawns in a much larger game, and the true players still remained hidden in the dark. Determined to find those responsible, Stiles dove headfirst into the investigation. But a more immediate threat emerged when Donovan, now a chimera, cornered Stiles in the library parking lot. Donovan's thirst for revenge was palpable as he prepared to torture the sheriff's son who'd once put him behind bars. Stiles managed to create a distraction with a fake emergency call, but the confrontation was inevitable. Scott discovered that the bodies of Tracy and Lucas had been stolen from both the veterinary clinic and the hospital morgue, adding a new layer of mystery to an already tangled situation. The pack uncovered a crucial clue, a book titled The Dread Doctors, which seemed to describe their current reality in eerie, impossible detail. Theo found out the book had been dedicated to Dr. Valak, an old enemy locked away inside Eichen House. The The group headed there to question him, in a visit that would push them to their limits. Valak revealed he had written the book as a tool, meant to awaken suppressed memories in those who'd encountered the doctors. In exchange for more information, he demanded a recording of Lydia's banshee scream, because even villains have their price. As the conversation unfolded, Kira's fox spirit lost control, triggering an electrical surge that disabled Eichenhaus's security system. The disturbance opened the door for the doctors to break in. With terrifying precision, Malia was hit with a devastating flashback from the night her family died and uncovered a shocking truth. The desert wolf was there, and she caused the crash. Chaos erupted as the doctors attacked Valak, but he managed to use the recording of Lydia's scream to shatter his glass cell and escape. The pack barely made it out alive, and Stiles, overwhelmed, took the blame for everything that had happened. The consequences of their past were coming back to haunt them in ways they never could have imagined.
I think we're okay. Stiles.
It's not okay.
Burdened by the crushing weight of responsibility, Stiles and his pack devised a new plan based on a disturbing theory. The chimeras weren't chosen at random. The decision was unanimous and risky. Everyone had to read the book The Dread Doctors to trigger repressed memories, even knowing it could psychologically destroy them. The reading unleashed terrifying psychosomatic reactions. Scott suffered such a severe asthma attack that he passed out, only to be saved at the last second by Liam, who mysteriously showed up with his inhaler. Lydia had a flashback, but not about the doctors. Instead, she relived a memory of her grandmother at Eichenhaus, gripped by paranoia and fear, a haunting glimpse of Lydia's own possible fate. Theo continued sowing discord, warning Scott that Kira's kitsune nature made her especially vulnerable to linguistic tricks like those used in the book. He revealed he had overheard her whispering in Japanese while asleep.
I am the messenger of death.
Liam uncovered the missing piece of the puzzle. Hayden, his former rival, had undergone a kidney transplant years ago. He confronted her, and when he asked her to close her eyes, he saw the supernatural glow, confirming she was a chimera too. The devastating truth was finally revealed. All of the doctor's test subjects had something in common. They all had 2 sets of DNA: transplants, transfusions, vanishing twins. At the hospital, Stiles experienced a gut-wrenching flashback of his mother at the peak of her dementia, accusing him of trying to kill her, a memory he had buried for years. The scene cut back to the confrontation on the rooftop, revealing the real memory Stiles had repressed. In a desperate attempt to escape Donovan, he had climbed onto a scaffold that collapsed, impaling and killing his attacker. It was an accident, an act of self-defense, but a deadly secret that had been eating him alive. In the final moment, it was revealed that Theo had seen everything. He approached Stiles, promising to keep his secret, establishing a dark, manipulative hold over him. The emotional blackmail had begun. Scott refused to bite Hayden, fearing the transformation might kill her, a decision that tested his humanity against Liam's growing desperation. Instead, they attempted a risky chelation therapy to remove the mercury from her blood, but her condition only worsened. The approaching supermoon heightened everyone's aggression, especially Liam's, who was willing to do anything to save Hayden. Meanwhile, Beacon Hill's police chased a mysterious creature tearing through the town, unaware it was actually Parrish in his hellhound form. Theo tracked down Lydia and revealed the truth about Parrish in a conversation that changed everything. He was a hellhound, a supernatural guardian. Before she could warn anyone, Theo attacked her with his claws, tapping into her memories and leaving her incapacitated. He confronted Scott and revealed he was the first chimera, sparking a brutal fight that proved everything had been orchestrated from the beginning. Theo beat Scott mercilessly and declared that the pack now belonged to him. Stiles discovered his father had been critically injured and was at the hospital. Theo intercepted him with one final blackmail. If Stiles helped Scott, his father would die. Fueled by pain and the power of the supermoon, Liam lashed out at Scott in a fit of rage, blaming him for Hayden's impending death. In the middle of the fight, Mason arrived with devastating news. Hayden was already gone, weakened and defeated. Scott lay on the ground as Theo unveiled his dark plan. Using the Dread Doctor's power, he resurrected Hayden and the other chimeras, forming his own pack in a twisted display of necromancy. Theo delivered the final blow, leaving Scott for dead on the cold floor. Melissa found her lifeless son but refused to give up, showing the true strength of a mother's love. With a desperate scream, she awakened the alpha within him, bringing him back to life through sheer will. The final scene showed Theo inside Eichenhaus, standing before Lydia, now catatonic, and revealing his new pack. He declared they all belonged to him. The war had only just begun. The battle at Eichenhaus was only the beginning of a much larger problem, one that threatened the entire town. A new threat emerged when the last chimera attacked a communications tower, revealing its itself as a creature of immense strength and speed, known only as the Beast. Its arrival made all previous dangers seem like child's play by comparison. Liam confronted Hayden, alive but changed and distant, in an emotionally charged conversation. Stiles finally came clean to his father about Donovan, in a confession that felt like a weight lifted. The sheriff absolved him, saying it was self-defense, and urged him to forgive himself and to fix his friendship with Scott. Meanwhile, Theo continued to tighten his grip on power, manipulating the resurrected chimeras and using them for his own dark purposes. Investigating the Beast's attack, Scott and Stiles uncovered a chilling truth. This creature wasn't a new creation, it was something ancient, brought back to life. They turned to Gerard Argent for answers. In a shocking revelation that tied past to present, he identified the creature as La Bête du Gévaudan, a monster with a bloody personal connection to the Argent family history. Realizing the scale of the threat, Scott knew the only way to fight back was to reunite his true pack. With the Beast attacking the hospital and Valak about to operate on Lydia, time was running out in a literal race against death. Scott and Stiles devised a bold plan to infiltrate Eichen House, an operation requiring military-level precision. Each team member had a critical role. Kira had to trigger a controlled blackout to reactivate a stolen access card. Malia would serve as the getaway driver, and Scott and Liam were tasked with getting Stiles to the restricted ward. Theo inserted himself into the mission, offering a way through the mountain ash barrier. With no other options, Scott reluctantly accepted.
He probably thinks what we're all thinking.
Forming a temporary alliance with the devil himself. During the break-in, Kira struggled to control her electric powers, but managed to cut the power at the exact right moment. When a sealed door blocked their path, Scott drew on the anger from his earlier fight with Liam to power through it. It was a crucial step toward reconciliation, a moment that proved pain could be turned into strength. Stiles finally reached Lydia, but Valak had already begun the procedure, locked in a race against time and madness. The situation escalated when Lydia's mother arrived, demanding to see her daughter, and Theo's pack stormed the facility. But they weren't after Lydia, they were after the Hellhound, revealing that everyone had hidden agendas. Amid the chaos, Eichen House went into lockdown, trapping everyone inside. Parrish, in his Hellhound form, confronted the Chimeras in a battle where literal fire met supernatural fury. The rescue mission had become a war on multiple fronts. The shock of Liam's revelation hung over the lacrosse field like a cloud of terror. The Beast was closer than anyone had imagined. Trapped inside the school library, Gerard began telling Lydia the story of his ancestor, Marie-Jeanne Vallée, the huntress of Gévaudan, in a tale that wove together centuries of blood and vengeance. He recounted how Marie-Jeanne, a skeptic by nature, was forced to believe in the supernatural when the Beast, who turned out to be her own brother, Sébastien, began terrorizing their 18th century village in an epic family tragedy. The story detailed how Sébastien became the Beast and how Marie-Jeanne, with help from Henri Argent, forged a special spear to hunt him down, a quest that lasted 3 long years. After a relentless pursuit, she finally killed him and performed the Damnatio Memoriae ritual to erase his name from history, ensuring he would be remembered only as a monster. In the present, Parrish, now fully aware of his true nature as Cerberus, made the decision to leave, a choice that shook everyone. He told Lydia that she was the real hope against the Beast, and then vanished. Gerard revealed that he had shared the story to inspire Lydia, explaining that the Argent name descended from Marie-Jeanne and that their destiny was to kill the Beast, an inherited duty spanning generations. Back on the field, Scott slowly recovered from the supernatural attack. Liam, panicked, stared at his own blood-stained sneakers, but Scott realized the blood wasn't his. Following Liam's horrified gaze, Scott turned and locked eyes with Mason, frozen in total shock. The Beast's identity was finally revealed in a twist no one saw coming. The monster had been hiding in the unlikeliest place of all. The transformation was complete, a metamorphosis that defied all logic. Mason was gone. In his place stood the Beast of Gévaudan, now with a name, Sébastien Vallée. Argent revealed that his cane was, in fact, the reforged spear, the only weapon capable of killing the creature. It was a revelation that connected all the pieces of an ancient puzzle. The Beast escaped through the sewers, a retreat that promised even greater terror. The pack regrouped to form a final plan. Scott theorized that Mason's essence still existed within Sébastien, like a missing twin buried deep inside. The strategy was clear and risky. Lydia would use her banshee scream to call out Mason's name, hoping it would force the Beast to revert to his human form, a gamble that humanity might triumph over monstrosity. Sébastien began his hunt for the spear, proving he knew the legend better than anyone. He confronted the sheriff at the station, showing he was immune to modern weapons before attacking Hayden and Lydia. The Desert Wolf cornered Malia, demanding back the power she claimed had been stolen from her at birth, a confrontation that would reveal painful truths about Malia's lineage. Chris prepared Parrish for the battle, revealing his true identity, the Hellhound, fated to fight the beast in a clash that echoed through the ages. Meanwhile, Deucalion outplayed Theo, proving that even manipulators can be manipulated. The real plan? He had given Scott Belasco's claws, not to kill, but to connect. The final confrontation began in an epic battle. Parrish, as the Hellhound, faced off against the beast, a collision of primal strength and eternal fire. Scott used the claws to force Sebastian to relive his memories of Allison, an emotional connection that pierced through death and time. Confusing her with his sister Marie-Jeanne, Sebastian was momentarily stunned. Kira returned just in time to help subdue Theo, proving that sometimes justice comes in unexpected forms. In a supernatural reckoning, the ground split open and Theo's sister dragged him into the underworld.
God help me! No! God help me! God! No! God!
With the beast weakened, Lydia let out her scream, a raw surge of power calling out Mason's name. The dark form dissolved, leaving a dazed but safe Mason in its place. Months after the beast's defeat, Scott and Stiles' attempt to stop what they thought was a dangerous truck ended in a comical mishap involving a helium delivery. The incident sparked an existential question. With graduation approaching, did Beacon Hills still need them? The answer came in the form of Alex, a traumatized teenager found after a car crash, suffering from total amnesia about his parents' disappearance. When Scott looked into his memories, he saw a terrifying image, a man on horseback holding a weapon, something that shouldn't have been possible to witness. Their investigation led the pack to an empty house, as if Alex's parents had been erased from existence. Lydia's banshee intuition connected the clues to a chilling myth, the Wild Hunt, spectral riders who abduct people and erase all memory of them, a threat greater than anything they had ever faced. The theory turned into grim reality when the Ghost Riders stormed the sheriff's station and abducted Alex in a brutal display of power. Suddenly, only Scott and Stiles remembered he had ever existed. They uncovered a horrifying rule. Anyone who sees the Riders is marked to be taken next, with no chance of escape or appeal. At school, Stiles began to fade from reality in a mind-bending ordeal. His friends looked at him in confusion. His photo in the yearbook was blank, and his jersey had already been reassigned. The Ghost Riders cornered him in the parking lot in a final hunt. In a desperate moment, he managed to send a message to Scott and Lydia, pleading with them to find a way to remember him. After telling Lydia he loved her, a confession that came too late, he was taken. Stiles vanished before the eyes of his best friends, and from their memories. Lydia was left only with a lingering, inexplicable feeling that she had forgotten someone vital to her soul. At school, late at night, Corey and Mason were working on physics, trying to earn extra credit in a semblance of normalcy that was about to be shattered when the compass suddenly went haywire, a clear sign that supernatural forces were interfering with reality. Upstairs, in the library, two Ghost Riders appeared in a terrifying manifestation, but they didn't take anyone, vanishing as quickly as they had arrived, a break in their usual pattern that left everyone confused. Lydia was haunted by a vision of a train passing through her bedroom, a premonition she couldn't quite place, but that continued to torment her. The next day, the duo returned to the library, searching for answers they weren't even sure they wanted to find. Using his chameleon abilities, Corey managed to see a residual image of the Ghost Riders. He realized they were holding something, or someone, in a discovery that changed everything they thought they knew about the previous attack. The theory that someone had been taken but erased from everyone's memory began to take shape, a terrifying possibility. Deaton explained they were suffering from a kind of phantom limb syndrome for memories, where the subconscious tried to fill in a void left by something or someone important. That idea triggered a fragmented memory in Scott and Malia. Both remembered being in the woods the night Scott was bitten, but the memory felt off, as if they hadn't been alone. The undeniable proof came when Corey used his power to reveal a forgotten library card. It belonged to Jake Sullivan, a physics lab student who had been completely erased from reality. Now certain that everyone was missing the same person, the group turned to Lydia in a desperate final attempt. In a trance-like state, she performed automatic writing. She filled an entire page with the word mischief before scribbling one final cryptic clue: Stiles. The name echoed in their minds like a key unlocking a locked door. Stiles Stiles materialized in a desolate, sterile train station, Station 137, in a reality that defied all logic. The other passengers stood in a catatonic state, unaware of the horror unfolding around them. He quickly realized he wasn't alone. Peter Hale was there too, in a meeting no one had planned. Peter revealed he'd been captured 3 months ago, shortly after escaping from Eichen House. What he shared next shattered any hope for an easy way out. They had been taken by the Ghost Riders, beings that erased their victims from existence. Cynical and defeated, Peter insisted there was no escape. A resignation that clashed with everything Stiles believed in. The station wasn't real. It was a supernatural trap, perfectly designed. One of the prisoners made a desperate attempt to escape, jumping onto one of the Ghost Riders' horses as they passed through the station, only to be instantly disintegrated by a magical barrier. To Peter, it was final proof they were trapped forever. But Stiles refused to give up. A testament to the idea that sometimes hope is the only weapon against despair. Back in Beacon Hills, Lydia and Scott felt an impossible void. An absence they couldn't name, but one that consumed them. Lydia's intuition led her to Stiles' abandoned Jeep, a discovery that would change everything. They claimed it just in time, stopping it from being towed when the tow truck mysteriously stalled. Sheriff Stilinski didn't recognize the vehicle, a heartbreaking case of selective amnesia. He claimed the Jeep had belonged to his late wife and had been stolen years ago, a distorted memory that revealed the power of the Riders. Back at the station, which was now filling with more victims from other decimated towns, Stiles began to understand. This place wasn't a prison. It was a waiting room for total erasure. Driven by a complicated paternal need to protect Malia, Peter decided to risk the same crossing that had killed the other prisoner. Engulfed in flames on a journey through the impossible, he broke through the barrier and reappeared in Beacon Hills, badly burned but alive. Before collapsing, he handed over the keys to the Jeep, a final tether to reality. Inside the vehicle, they found a radio.
Hello? Is anyone there? Can anyone hear me?
Stiles' voice echoed through the speakers, defying all known laws. He was alive, and they remembered him, a small victory against oblivion. Before the connection was lost, Stiles shouted a single clue that would change everything. Find Canaan. In a German base in 1943, a Nazi officer named Douglas presented the Ghost Riders to his superiors, an unstoppable army he intended to control, in a chilling display that human ambition knows no bounds. In the present day, Douglas, now in Beacon Hills, cornered Chris and Melissa during an operation that blended military precision with personal cruelty. He revealed that he needed the pineal gland of a hellhound for his dark plans. After overpowering the pair in a brutal show of strength, he forced them to help him track down Parrish in a hunt that would test every moral boundary. Underground, Scott, Lydia, and Malia located the rift, a discovery that merged science and horror, a glowing crack in the earth that incinerated everything that came near. Meanwhile, Liam, Mason, and Hayden kept watch over Theo, who offered to reveal Douglas's secret in exchange for his freedom, a desperate bargain. They agreed to break his sister's sword to release him. Theo confessed the truth about Douglas, unraveling decades of mystery. A Lowenmensch, part wolf, part lion, who had tried to control the wild hunt for the Nazis, a plan that cost millions of lives. But the plan went awry when a Ghost Rider struck him with its whip, a cosmic punishment. The Dread Doctors found him and submerged him in their tank for 70 years, during which he absorbed the powers of an Alpha, a Lowenmensch, and a Ghost Rider. Liam and Hayden were ambushed by the Ghost Riders in a savage attack. Hayden sacrificed herself so Liam could escape and warn Scott, a testament that love sometimes demands the ultimate sacrifice. In Stiles' empty room, Sheriff Stilinski was overwhelmed by a powerful memory of his son, a connection that transcended realities. The sheer emotional force tore through the fabric of space, opening a brief rift. Scott and the others realized the key wasn't finding a rift, it was creating one through powerful memories, a breakthrough that would change their strategy entirely. Douglas arrived with Parrish and forced the Hellhound to open the main rift in a terrifying show of absolute power, and then crossed into the dimension of the hunt, taking Parrish with him. The villain had just gained access to the greatest army the world has ever known. With the rift sealed and Douglas lost in a parallel dimension, the pack's only hope was to create a new portal, one powerful enough to tear through reality itself, fueled by the strength of their memories. They chose to use the cryo chamber in the hideout to induce a deep hypnotic state, a risky experiment that would push the limits of the human mind. At the sheriff's station, Sheriff Stilinski and Liam were cornered by the Ghost Riders, trapped in a hopeless standoff. With no other option, the sheriff made a decision that went against every instinct he had. He set Theo free. Scott was the first to enter the chamber, embarking on a journey through his own memories. Guided by Lydia and Malia, he found himself in a school hallway where each locker held a memory of Stiles. Overwhelmed by the flood of images, Scott began to lose control. His body started to freeze as the process nearly killed him. They pulled him out just in time. Next, Malia stepped in, a true act of courage. Her mental landscape was the school library. There, she focused on her memories with Stiles, eventually finding the moment he promised he would never leave her. But it wasn't enough. The rift still hadn't opened. Realizing that emotional resonance was the true key, the group agreed Lydia had to go next, in a final, desperate attempt. They put her under hypnosis, sending her deep into the most intimate corners of her mind. She relived pivotal moments that shaped their bond, the dance she turned down, the time he predicted she'd win a Fields Medal, and finally, the kiss he gave her to stop a panic attack. In that moment, everything came flooding back. Lydia remembered it all in a surge of clarity. She saw the last instant before the riders took him, when he told her he loved her, a confession she had somehow forgotten. The strength of that forgotten memory shattered the barrier between worlds, proof that true love can overcome any magic. And from that rift, he emerged, finally back among the living. Their reunion was cut short as the Wild Hunt's train station began to materialize inside the library, a fusion of realities threatening to destroy both worlds. Stiles revealed that Douglas had been using Corey as an anchor for the merge, exploiting the boy's unique ability to exist in both planes at once. Now, the goal was to find the train track switch in a desperate race to stop the hunt from consuming Beacon Hills. An actual countdown to the apocalypse. While Scott and Stiles searched for the switch in a frantic effort, the final battle unfolded on the train tracks in an epic clash between reality and nightmare. Douglas faced off against Scott in one last attempt to command the hunt.
You of all people, Scott, should know what happens to a lone wolf.
But the pack united, proving that chosen family is stronger than any single power. Malia, Peter, and even Theo joined the fight in an unlikely alliance. Douglas tried to control the Ghost Riders, but they turned on him in a twist that revealed the hunt answers to no one. With Douglas defeated in a hard-won victory, Scott triggered the track switch in a defining moment of heroic leadership. The train station vanished, severing the worlds for good. Everyone who had been taken returned to Beacon Hills in a rain of lost souls. Months later, on the last day of school, the pack said their goodbyes in a ceremony heavy with emotion. Stiles handed Scott the keys to his Jeep in a symbolic passing of the torch, and the two drove off together, a sign that some friendships are forever. They were ready to face whatever came next, because there would always be someone out there who needed them, a promise that would echo through time. Summer was coming to an end, but peace never lasted long in Beacon Hills, and this time would be no different. The lacrosse team was training under the leadership of a new assistant captain, Scott McCall, but the real captain, Liam, was absent, paralyzed by Hayden's departure, drowning in a grief that consumed him completely. Mason managed to convince him to return to the field in a genuine act of friendship, reminding him that senior year was starting and the team needed their leader. Liam took out his frustration on the field in a display of raw aggression that caught everyone's attention. Meanwhile, Malia was preparing to leave Beacon Hills for Paris, a decision that would test her loyalty, but fate had other plans. Her flight was delayed by a twist of destiny. The investigation led them to a sinister discovery in the school basement, spiders and rats infesting the space in a scene of biological horror. The climax came with the sight of a rat king, a grotesque tangle of dead rats, their tails knotted together in a vision that defied sanity. The air was thick with the smell of pure, concentrated fear. Nearby, they found a list containing the names of every supernatural being in Beacon Hills, a discovery that sent chills through them all. At the school, the new guidance counselor, Monroe, was meeting with several students in what seemed to be a display of care, including Liam, Corey, and Nolan. She showed a particular interest in their experiences. Nolan, visibly shaken and increasingly paranoid, confessed to her that what he saw on the field wasn't just a normal wolf, a revelation that would change everything. The threat became all too real when Deputy Parrish, investigating a car crash, was ambushed by a dark figure in a brutal confrontation. The attacker, a hellhound like him, engaged him in a fight between equals. She revealed she had been accidentally released from the Wild Hunt, and now had to be stopped, a confession that exposed the cost of saving Stiles. Parrish was seriously wounded. Lydia and Malia uncovered a devastating truth. In rescuing Stiles, they had opened a door to another world, and something else had come through with him, a consequence that would haunt them all. There is always a price to pay, a lesson Beacon Hills was about to learn the hard way. Far from town, Stiles had started his FBI internship, a new life that seemed safe, but during a lecture, he spotted a wanted poster with the face of a fugitive described as bizarrely wild. wild, a description that shook him to his core. The fugitive was Derek Hale, a revelation that tied his past to an uncertain future. With a new alliance forged between Monroe and her frightened recruit, the hunt truly began, a chilling demonstration that fear can be a weapon far more powerful than any bullet. Gerard began training his new soldier, teaching him to think strategically in a form of military education tailored to supernatural extermination. Their first target, Brett Talbot, a choice that would test his newly acquired skills. His sister Lori made a terrifying discovery when she found his bloodied lacrosse stick. In a desperate act of trust, she turned to Scott for help, a trust that would be sorely betrayed. The pack ventured into the woods to find Brett before the hunters did, in a race against death, but it didn't take long for them to realize they weren't dealing with amateurs. What they were facing was far more terrifying. The hunters had set up intricate traps and used diversion tactics, evidence that they were being led by someone with military training. Every move felt coldly calculated, executed with surgical precision. Lydia and Melissa examined the body of the creature that escaped the wild hunt, an autopsy that unveiled unimaginable horrors. The revelation was staggering. The body had no DNA, no cellular structure, an utter biological impossibility. It was an entity that seemed to exist solely to radiate pure, tangible terror, a concentrated manifestation of fear, and the very source of the paranoia now spreading through the town like a plague. The fear was so overwhelming that Mason began seeing visions of the faceless body everywhere, a mental breakdown that pushed him to the edge of insanity. In the forest, the group discovered the hunters had been using the underground tunnels to move undetected, a strategy that pointed to one chilling name, Gerard Argent. The suspicion that the old hunter was behind it all grew stronger, fueling a paranoia that was all too justified. Fear had reached the school as well, where Nolan attacked Corey in the library in a violent outburst. Nolan tried to expose Corey as supernatural in front of everyone, a public display of fear and paranoia that showed just how deep the infection had spread. Liam and Lori finally found Brett in the tunnels, badly wounded and poisoned, in a desperate race against time. They tried to escape, but the hunters cornered them at the surface in a deadly ambush. Brett and Lori fled to the streets searching for help in a frantic sprint, but were struck down by a speeding car in a brutal public execution. Dozens of drivers and bystanders watched the killing and did nothing, a grim sign of how far the paranoia had gripped the town. Lydia's premonition had come true, a prophecy fulfilled. People weren't just afraid anymore, they were turning against them. A war had begun, one that couldn't be won with claws and fangs. From a distance, Gerard delivered the final lesson to his recruit, completing his military indoctrination.
The best way to build an army is through fear.
A strategy that would soon prove devastatingly effective. The infiltration of the police force by the hunters had become a real threat, a wave of corruption that would test every alliance. Meanwhile, Theo was being tortured alongside two young werewolves in a brutal show of force meant to prove that no one was safe. Zhang and Tirniao were revealed to be the last surviving members of Satomi's pack, a shocking twist that exposed the scale of the carnage. Together, the three managed to escape their captor in a desperate bid for freedom. Their torturer turned out to be a sadistic former employee of Eichenhaus, an ominous connection that demonstrated how evil could seep through even the most established institutions. Back in Beacon Hills, Scott's father arrived to investigate the growing crisis under a federal mandate. The sheriff's station quickly became the eye of the storm when Zhang and Tirniao were arrested for murder, an accusation that would push every bond to its breaking point. Monroe and a heavily armed group of hunters surrounded the station in a display of military might, demanding that the sheriff hand over the two werewolves, an ultimatum with no room for negotiation. The station went into lockdown. Scott, Lydia, Malia, and Liam were trapped inside. As the standoff escalated, fear began to creep in, and the tension became unbearable, especially for Liam, whose psychological state was rapidly deteriorating. Mason and Corey uncovered the true source of the fear gripping the town, an ancient creature known as the Anukite, a being that fed on terror and discord, a primordial force of destruction. The Anukite had two faces, hinting at the possibility that it was composed of two separate entities who, once united, would become unstoppable, an exponentially growing threat. Inside the station, Scott confronted Zhang and Tirniao in a tense interrogation that revealed unsettling truths. They confessed to hunting and killing the hunters responsible for massacring their pack, including Brett and Lori, acts of vengeance cloaked in blood. To get them out alive, Scott devised a daring plan to fake their deaths with a risky medical ruse. But at the moment of the switch, his father father intervened, backed by the FBI, in a twist no one saw coming. He struck a deal with Monroe in a costly act of diplomacy. Zhang and Tierney would be transferred to another jurisdiction, and in exchange, Scott and his pack were to leave Beacon Hills for good, a sentence of exile. Under the watchful eyes of the hunters and Scott's own father, the pack packed up and left town in a forced farewell, but it was all a lie. Once they were far enough away, they pulled the car over, a bold signal that some promises are meant to be broken. They were ready for the counterattack. The war had just begun. Theo brought new information during a meeting marked by both nostalgia and urgency, but the central mystery of who the other half of the Anukite was still remains. The group split up in a multi-pronged strategy. Mason and Theo went after Aaron, the known half, while Scott and Liam tried to identify the mysterious voice on a phone found in the woods, a clue that could either save them or doom them all. Messages from Stiles revealed his growing concern and his intent to return to Beacon Hills, proving that some bonds transcend distance. Theo and Mason descended into the city's tunnels on a subterranean journey, following the trail of fear left by the creature, a path soaked in tangible terror. Meanwhile, Scott and Liam's investigation led them to a teacher, Mistress Finch, in an unexpected connection. Liam confronted her in a tension-filled conversation, and she finally admitted the voice was hers, a confession that changed everything. She wasn't the creature, but was desperately trying to contact her daughter Quinn. Quinn was a werewolf from a pack known as the Primal, hiding deep within the forest, a revelation that connected all the pieces of the deadly puzzle. Malia and Lydia decided to risk everything in a final gambit to bring back the Hellhound Hallwin. Using an MRI machine to extract the bullet from his head, they performed a dangerous procedure that could kill him in the process. In the tunnels, the Anukite in Aaron's form attacked with terrifying force. Theo stayed behind to fight in a heroic act, urging Mason to find Quinn and protect her, a mission that would determine the fate of everyone. At the hospital, Hallwin came back to life for a brief moment, just long enough to deliver a dire warning.
If it binds its other half, if the two become one, do not look.
A warning that would come too late. His words echoed in the air as hunters ambushed Mistress Finch in a brutal attack. The two halves merged in a horrifying transformation, becoming the complete Anukite, a shadowy, misshapen figure radiating pure fear. Mistress Finch died in Scott's arms, a loss that would haunt him deeply. Now the pack faced an enemy they couldn't even look at without dying. Their only hope lay in learning to fight blind, with Deucalion as their guide. In a cruel twist of fate, in secret, Gerard forged a dark pact with the Anuk-Ite, an alliance that would seal Scott's fate. He would poison the young Alpha, and the creature would finish the job. A betrayal that would cost everything. In the midst of a declared war that had turned Beacon Hills into a battleground, Scott's pack came together in a powerful reminder that family is stronger than fear. Stiles, Lydia, Malia, and the recently returned Derek Hale reunited with Scott in an emotionally charged moment, abruptly interrupted by a calculated provocation, a phone call from Gerard Argent. The hunter revealed his brutal strategy with tactical cruelty. He had scattered Scott's allies all across town, creating multiple simultaneous targets in a complex military-style operation. Parrish was cornered inside Eichen House, trapped in a deadly snare. Liam and the others were pinned down at the hospital with no way out. To further escalate the pressure and show the global reach of his power, Gerard revealed that even Jackson, now living in London, had been lured back and taken hostage at the armory, in a bold move that showcased the hunter's influence. Stiles recounted how he had found Derek during a high-risk FBI operation in North Carolina, an almost fatal rescue mission that pulled him out from the hands of other hunters. It was a show of unwavering loyalty. There was no time for nostalgia. The new threat, the Anukite, was Gerard's real weapon, a creature that fed on fear and could kill with a single glance, a primordial force of destruction. Scott realized that to stop the hunters, they had to eliminate the very source of the fear that empowered them. A strategy was formed, one that would push them all to their limits. They would confront the Anukite head-on. The group split up in a multi-front operation. Scott, Malia, and Peter went to the school to lure the creature into what was essentially a suicide mission. Meanwhile, Stiles and Lydia raced to the armory in a desperate attempt to rescue Jackson. At the school, the Anukite unleashed an assault of pure terror. Its presence turned victims into stone statues, a terrifying display of power that bent the rules of reality. Peter was struck and paralyzed, a cruel and calculated casualty. At the armory, Stiles and Lydia managed to free Jackson in a cinematic rescue operation, only to discover discover Ethan was with him, a welcome and unexpected surprise. The four made a thrilling escape. Back at the school, Monroe ambushed Scott in a final act of betrayal, shooting him with a yellow wolfsbane bullet, an extremely rare and lethal poison to an alpha, chosen specifically to kill him. Wounded and fading fast, Scott was found by Derek, who helped him burn the toxin out of his system, a powerful testament that brotherhood transcends pain. While they recovered in the library, a brief calm before the storm, the Anukite launched its final assault, not with physical force, but with psychological terror in a mental war. It projected illusions of each character's deepest wounds in a personalized torture. Derek was confronted by the image of Jennifer Blake, the teacher he loved, who had betrayed him, a wound that never fully healed. Scott faced the haunting image of Void Stiles, a memory of his greatest failure when he couldn't save his best friend from the demon that had possessed him. Argent confronted Kate in a final, deeply personal standoff that revealed a devastating betrayal. He had given most of the yellow wolfsbane to Monroe, keeping only a single bullet for himself, a stark sign that paranoia had poisoned even their own family. At the hospital, the sheriff arrived just in time in a heroic entrance that reasserted his authority and forced the hunters to back down. His courage proved contagious, and he saved Parrish in a critical victory. Back at the library, Scott had a revelation that changed everything. He couldn't fight the Anukite as long as he could see it. Its power to instill fear would trap him with no way out. In a desperate act that tested the limits of human courage, he drove his own claws into his eyes, blinding himself to strip the creature of its power, a heroic act of self-sacrifice. Unable to use fear against Scott, a pivotal turning point, the Anukite was left vulnerable. Stiles arrived at the perfect moment, casting a line of mountain ash in a final move. The creature was trapped, frozen into a harmless statue in a victory paid for in blood and tears. With the source of fear destroyed, hunters across the city hesitated and lowered their weapons, a clear sign that fear is contagious, but so is bravery. Kate turned on Gerard in one final betrayal, blaming him for the downfall of their family, an accusation that would echo forever. The battle was over, a bitter victory, but Scott couldn't heal. His eyes remained damaged, the blindness threatening to become permanent, a cruel punishment for his bravery. Seeing his pain, in a pure act of love, Malia kissed him, a moment of deep emotional connection that transcended physical wounds. The emotional shock finally triggered his healing, restoring his sight, a powerful reminder that love heals all wounds through time.